Have you ever woken from a dream so vivid, so real, that you wondered if it meant something, if there was a hidden message, or if it was just your brain doing some random nighttime cleaning? Well, get ready to discover something that will completely change how you view your dreams. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist at Stanford, has just published data that makes Carl Jung look like a visionary. I'm talking about REM sleep research that confirms theories Jung proposed nearly a century ago, theories the scientific community largely ignored for decades. And the most impressive part? The results are so precise, they're downright unsettling. But before I show you these discoveries, I need to tell you a story. A story about a man who had the same dream for 20 years. Every night, the same setting, the same characters, the same sequence of events. This man's name was Daniel, and his dream changed our understanding of how the mind works during sleep. Daniel dreamt he was walking down a dark hallway. At the end of the hallway, there was always a door, and every time he tried, to open that door, he woke up. For 20 years, this was his nightly reality, until one night, something different happened. He managed to open the door. On the other side, he found an 8-year-old version of himself. The child was crying, and when Daniel asked why, the child said something that changed his life forever. But I'll tell you what the child said in a moment, because first, you need to understand what was happening in Daniel's brain during these dreams. And that's where Huberman enters the story. Huberman discovered that during REM sleep, our brain isn't simply doing random cleanup. It's doing something far more sophisticated, something Jung called individuation, the process by which we become who we truly are. Let me explain how this works. During REM sleep, 3 specific areas of your brain become hyperactive. The first is the visual cortex. That's why your dreams are so vivid. The second is the limbic system, responsible for emotions. And the third, the hippocampus, where your deepest memories reside. Now here's the fascinating part. These 3 areas aren't working independently. They're talking to each other, creating connections, finding patterns. It's as if your brain is a detective trying to solve a mystery, and that mystery is you. Jung always said that dreams were the psyche's way of communicating with us, that they contained symbols and archetypes that helped us understand hidden aspects of our personality. The scientific community laughed at this idea for decades. How could something so subjective have a scientific basis? But Huberman didn't laugh. He tested it. And what he discovered will leave you speechless. Huberman monitored the brain activity of 1,200 people during REM sleep. He mapped every area of the brain, every neural connection, every activity pattern, and he found something no one expected. Dreams follow an architecture, a structure. They're not random. They're not chaotic. They're organized in a way that suggests purpose. Even more specific, Huberman discovered that there's a neural activation pattern that repeats in every person, a pattern that Jung called the collective unconscious. You know those universal dreams? Dreaming you're flying, dreaming you're falling, dreaming you're being chased, dreaming you're late for something important. Huberman discovered that these dreams activate the exact same brain areas in everyone. The same neural connections, the same activity patterns, as if there were pre-installed software in our brains, software that Jung identified as archetypes. But this is only the beginning. Huberman went further. He wanted to understand not only what happens during dreams, but why it happens. And here's where the story gets really interesting. He discovered that the brain uses dreams to process unresolved traumas, repressed fears, aspects of our personality that we reject or ignore. Jung called this the shadow self, the part of ourselves we prefer not to see, and Huberman proved Jung was right. During REM sleep, your brain literally forces you to confront your shadow self, through symbols, through metaphors, through situations that seem absurd on the surface, but make perfect sense when you understand the language being spoken. Let's go back to Daniel and his recurring dream. Remember the crying child on the other side of the door? What did he say that changed Daniel's life forever? The child looked at Daniel and said, "You abandoned me, and now I'll never be able to grow up." Daniel woke up that morning with an understanding that 20 years of therapy hadn't been able to give him. At 8 years old, his parents divorced, and Daniel decided he would never be vulnerable again. Never let anyone hurt him. He built emotional walls so high that even he couldn't climb them. The dark hallway was his emotional life. The locked door was his inability to access his feelings, and the child on the other side. It was the part of him that stopped growing emotionally at 8 years old. His brain had been trying to resolve this trauma for 20 years, every night through the same dream. And the night he finally managed to open the door, something changed in his neural structure. Huberman calls this traumatic integration. The interesting thing is that Daniel wasn't in therapy when this happened. He wasn't doing any conscious self-work. His own brain found a way to heal itself. Jung would say that Daniel finally integrated his shadow self. Huberman would say that Daniel allowed his brain to complete a process of traumatic memory reconsolidation that had been underway for 2 decades. 2 scientists, 2 eras, 2 languages, describing the exact same phenomenon. But Huberman's research goes even further. He discovered that people who pay attention to their dreams have a greater ability to process trauma. They have lower levels of anxiety. They have healthier relationships. As if the simple act of paying attention to dreams increased the efficiency of the healing process that occurs during sleep. Jung always said that dreams were letters we write to ourselves, letters we can choose to read or ignore. Huberman proved Jung was right, but he went further. He showed that when we choose to read these letters, our mental health improves measurably. And now comes the part that will leave you thoughtful. Dr. Huberman discovered that a specific type of dream emerges during life's transitions. Job changes, relationship endings, the death of loved ones, the birth of children. These dreams are unique, vivid, emotionally intense, and always involve symbols of transformation. Jung called these symbols archetypes of transformation: butterflies, bridges, portals, ladders, snakes shedding their skin. Huberman mapped brain activity during these dreams and found something extraordinary. The brain literally reconnects during these dreams. New neural connections are formed. Old connections are discarded. It's as if you're being reprogrammed for a new version of yourself. And here's the most impressive detail of all. This reprogramming process isn't random. It follows a pattern Jung identified as the process of self-realization. First, you confront your shadow self, the aspects of yourself you reject. Then you integrate your anima or animus, your feminine or masculine side. Next, you connect with your true self. Jung called this the self. Huberman discovered that these phases appear in dreams in the same sequence Jung described, as if there's a pre-programmed map for human development, a map that's running every night while you sleep. But there's more. Huberman found that people who interrupt this natural process through sleep medication or sleep deprivation have higher rates of depression, anxiety, and personality disorders, as if we're interfering with a fundamental evolutionary process. Jung always said that denying the importance of dreams was denying our own nature. Huberman proved Jung was right, but he showed that the consequences are even more serious than Jung imagined. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about adaptability. We're talking about psychological evolution. And now, the question you must be asking yourself: How can I use these discoveries in my own life? How can I decode the language of my dreams? How can I accelerate my own process of self-realization? Huberman developed a protocol, a scientific method based on Jung's theories, and the results are impressive. But before I show you this protocol, I need to tell you about Emily, a woman who used these techniques to solve a problem that had plagued her for 15 years. Emily had severe social phobia. She couldn't speak in public. She couldn't connect deeply with other people. She lived in a constant state of anxiety. She tried therapy, she tried medication, she tried everything within her reach. Nothing worked until she started paying attention to her dreams. And what she discovered through this practice will show you the real power of these discoveries. Emily began writing down her dreams every morning, but not just any way. She followed the protocol that Huberman developed based on Jungian theories. First, she wrote down everything she could remember, without judgment. Without trying to make sense of it, she simply recorded the images, the feelings, the sensations. Then she identified the symbols that appeared most frequently, and Emily began to notice a disturbing pattern. In almost all of her dreams, she was alone, in empty rooms, in deserted landscapes, in crowds where nobody saw her. Jung would say that Emily was dreaming about her shadow self, the part of her that felt fundamentally alone and invisible. Huberman would say that Emily's brain was processing a trauma of abandonment that happened in childhood, but that she couldn't consciously access. Both would be right. Emily discovered through her dreams that at the age of 5, during her parents' divorce, she developed an unconscious belief that if she became too visible, the important people in her life would abandon her. This belief had been driving her life for 30 years without her knowing it. But here's the most impressive part of Emily's story. After 3 months of writing down and analyzing her dreams, something changed. She started dreaming that she was no longer alone. First, animals appeared in her dreams. Then distant people appeared, then close people. And finally, she began to dream that she was connected, accepted, seen. Huberman calls this neural reprogramming through conscious attention to dreams. Jung would call it the integration of the shadow through dialogue with the unconscious. The result was the same. Emily began to feel more comfortable in social situations. She was able to give presentations at work. She developed deeper relationships. Her social phobia didn't disappear overnight, but for the first time in 15 years, she had hope and a practical tool to continue her healing. Now you must be wondering, what exactly is this protocol that Huberman developed? How can you start decoding your own dreams today? The answer will surprise you with its simplicity. Huberman discovered that it's not necessary to be an expert in Jungian psychology to use these techniques. In fact, the simpler the approach, the more effective it becomes. The protocol has 5 steps, and each step is based on a specific discovery about how the brain processes information during REM sleep. Step 1. Immediate capture. As soon as you wake up, before even getting out of bed, write down 3 things about your dream. They can be single words, they can be sensations, they can be fragmented images. Why does this work? Because dream memories dissolve in 60 seconds. Literally, Huberman measured this. If you don't capture something in the first few minutes after waking up, the information is lost forever. Jung always said that dreams were urgent messages from the unconscious. Huberman proved that this urgency is literal, neurologically literal. Step 2, identification of emotional patterns. After a week of capturing dream fragments, you'll start to notice emotional patterns: recurrent fear, specific anxiety, directed anger, unnamed sadness. Huberman discovered that these emotional patterns in dreams are direct maps to unprocessed traumas in conscious life. It's as if your brain is trying to show you exactly where you need to focus your attention to heal. Step 3, conscious symbolization. This is where Jung and Huberman meet most elegantly. Jung said that the unconscious speaks through symbols because it's the most efficient language for transmitting complex information. Dr. Huberman discovered that during REM sleep, the brain literally thinks in symbols. The areas responsible for linear language become less active, while the areas responsible for symbolic thought become hyperactive. So, when you see a snake in your dream, you're not just seeing a snake, you're seeing transformation, renewal, healing, or, depending on the context, betrayal, danger, fear of change. Huberman's protocol teaches you to identify these symbols and connect them to specific situations in your life. Step 4. Active dialogue. This is the most advanced part of the protocol, and also the most powerful. Here we enter territory that might seem like science fiction, but it's grounded in recent neurological discoveries that are revolutionizing our understanding of consciousness. Huberman discovered that when you ask yourself specific questions before sleep, your brain literally searches for the answers during REM sleep. This isn't a metaphor. It's a measurable process that occurs in specific areas of the prefrontal cortex that remain partially active during sleep. It's as if you could program your dreams to solve specific problems, as if you could consult your own internal supercomputer. Jung called this active imagination, the ability to consciously dialogue with the unconscious. He developed techniques where patients asked direct questions to dream characters and received answers that often resolved conflicts that years of conventional therapy couldn't touch. What Jung did intuitively, Huberman mapped neurologically. He discovered that when you formulate a clear question before sleep, the brain literally reorganizes its activity during REM sleep to seek connections, patterns, and insights related to that specific question. It's as if you activate an internal search algorithm that works while you sleep. Sarah used this technique to ask, "Why am I so afraid of being seen?" And that's how she discovered the trauma of abandonment at age 5. Daniel could have used this technique to ask, "What's on the other side of the door?" And perhaps he would have saved himself 20 years of repetitive dreams. Step 5. Behavioral integration. This is the step that separates knowledge from real transformation. Huberman discovered that insights gained through dreams only become lasting changes when they are translated into specific actions in conscious life. It's not enough to understand that you're afraid of abandonment. You need to take small actions to confront that fear safely. It's not enough to understand that you've rejected your emotional vulnerability. You need to practice being vulnerable in controlled situations. Jung would say that this is how you integrate your shadow self. Huberman would say this is how you consolidate new neural connections. The result is the same. You become a more complete and authentic version of yourself. But here's where Huberman's discoveries become truly revolutionary. He discovered that people who follow this protocol for 6 months not only improve their mental health, they develop a capacity he calls intuitive navigation. The ability to make complex decisions without excessive conscious analysis. The ability to feel when something is right or wrong before even understanding why. Jung called this archetypal wisdom. The ability to access the collective intelligence of humanity through the unconscious. Huberman calls it integrated neural processing. The ability to use both conscious logic and emotional and intuitive intelligence to navigate life. 2 names for the same phenomenon. A capacity that our ancestors possessed naturally, but that we have lost in modernity. And now comes the part that will make you question everything you thought you knew about intelligence. Huberman tested people who followed the dream analysis protocol against people who did not, in tests of complex decision-making, creativity, and problem-solving. The results were so consistent that they are downright disturbing. People who paid attention to their dreams made better decisions, had creative insights more frequently, solved problems more elegantly, as if they had access to a source of intelligence that others did not. Jung would say they were accessing the collective unconscious, the library of all human experience accumulated over millions of years. Huberman would say they were using the brain's full capacity, including processing that normally only happens during sleep. But regardless of the explanation, the result is clear. Paying attention to your dreams literally makes you smarter. Now you might be thinking, this sounds too good to be true. There must be a catch. And you're right to be skeptical, because there is a catch that Huberman discovered by accident, but which completely changed his understanding of how this process works. The catch is that not all dreams are useful. Huberman discovered that dreams that occur in the first 2 hours of sleep are mainly neural cleansing processes. They are important for health, but they do not contain significant information for self-knowledge. The truly transformative dreams occur in the last 2 hours of sleep, when REM sleep is deeper and more prolonged. This means that if you only sleep 6 hours a night, you're missing exactly the dreams that could help you evolve psychologically. Jung always said that modernity has disconnected us from our inner wisdom. Huberman proved that this disconnection is literal. We are literally depriving our brains of the time needed to process and integrate our life experiences. And here's the cruel irony. We live in the information age, but we are losing access to our oldest and deepest source of wisdom. But all is not lost. Huberman developed a technique to maximize dream quality even with less sleep. A technique he calls directed incubation. The idea is simple. If you only have limited time to dream, you can program your dreams to be more efficient. How? By asking yourself a specific question before sleep, holding a clear intention, directing your attention to a problem or situation you would like to understand better. Jung used a similar technique that he called directed dreaming. But Huberman went further. He mapped exactly what happens in the brain when you direct your intention before sleep, and he discovered something fascinating. When you formulate a clear question before sleep, specific areas of your brain remain partially active during REM sleep, not enough to wake you, but enough to influence the content of your dreams. It's as if you can hack your own unconscious. But here's the most important detail. The question needs to be formulated correctly. It's no use asking, "What should I do with my life?" Too generic, too broad. It's no use asking, "Why doesn't John love me?" Too specific, too limiting. The question needs to be what Huberman calls specific expansive, specific enough to direct attention, expansive enough to allow for unexpected insights. Examples of specific expansive questions: what fear is preventing my professional growth? What part of myself am I rejecting in this relationship? How can I transform my anger into something constructive? What limiting belief is driving my financial behavior? Questions like these activate what Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to find creative solutions to internal conflicts. Huberman calls it directed neural processing, the brain's ability to reorganize information during sleep to generate useful insights. Same phenomenon, different languages. And now we arrive at the deepest point of this entire discussion. Why does this work? Why does paying attention to dreams have such powerful effects on conscious life? Jung's answer was that dreams connect us with aspects of ourselves that we can't access when we're awake. Aspects that are essential for our development as whole human beings. Huberman's answer is that dreams represent the most sophisticated neural processing our brain is capable of, a processing that integrates memory, emotion, creativity, and intuition simultaneously. But both arrive at the same conclusion. Ignoring dreams is wasting our maximum capacity for psychological growth. It's like having a supercomputer at home and only using it as a calculator. Now comes the question that may be bothering you. If this is so powerful, why didn't we learn this in school? Why isn't it common knowledge? The answer is both simple and complex. Simple because for most of the 20th century, we didn't have the technology to measure what happens in the brain during sleep. Jung's theories seemed like poetic speculation. Complex because even now, with all the available scientific evidence, our culture values only what is measurable, quantifiable, controllable. Dreams are subjective, personal, difficult to standardize. Our society prefers pills to processes, immediate results to gradual transformation, external solutions to internal wisdom. But Huberman is changing that. He's making the subjective objective, the poetic scientific, the mystical measurable. And the implications go far beyond individual mental health. Imagine a world where people have access to their deepest wisdom, where important decisions are made with total integration of logic, emotion, and intuition. Imagine schools that teach children to pay attention to their dreams, companies that incorporate dream insights into creative processes, therapists who use dream analysis as a tool for precise diagnosis. It may sound like science fiction, but Huberman is testing practical applications in all these areas, and the preliminary results suggest that we are at the beginning of a revolution in how we understand consciousness, learning, and human development. Jung said that each person has a unique purpose in life, a specific contribution to give to humanity. And that dreams are the map to discover that purpose. Huberman is proving that Jung was right, but he's going further. He's showing that this map isn't just poetic. It's neurologically precise. Now you have a choice. You can continue ignoring your dreams, treating them as irrelevant nighttime entertainment, wasting 8 hours a night of advanced neural processing, or you can start paying attention, start asking questions, start dialoguing with the wisest part of yourself, the part that Jung called the self, the part that Huberman calls integrated intelligence, the part of you that has always known who you really are, but that you never learned to listen to. Your dreams are not just dreams, they are letters you write to yourself every night, letters that contain the answers to the most important questions of your life. Jung knew this a century ago. Huberman proved it with cutting-edge science. The only question that remains is, will you start reading your letters? Because on the other side of the door, you fear opening. Maybe the version of yourself you always knew you could become. And she's been waiting for you for a long time.